I've always wondered how council, take turns on that kind of stuff, but I don't really know who brought their glasses. That's good to know. Well, it was me.
Youngest, my third kid. They're a big block. Okay, down to came to the bottom. Down. They walked in there and the years of being year to year. Even went down. There. Main Street. Yeah.
Did you change your screen to everybody had their own house. Yeah. All the work is trying to do a lot of So last week, there were two of us, me and I think.
Everybody back.
The only one in it. Did you, where's the button?
They're right here. Do you see a reset?
Do we know which one?
There's a little.
There's hours. Hours.
You can reset it. Reset.
Yeah, probably have to push it. I don't think it's a button. Don't you have to- Yeah. Yeah. It's resetting.
I'm thinking about that. I read somebody.
Yeah, but they don't ever turn off anymore.
I'm thinking about that happening.
Not to tell Shaylee that. Hello, everyone. Hello. How are we gonna know?
Mic check.
Then- Can you hear it? Okay. We go ahead and start.
Now yours is working.
Okay. We're having a little trouble with our audio video, but we're gonna go ahead and start.
We need to start recording first.
Okay.
We need to start recording first. Lisa will tell you when.
Tell me when you're ready.
Ready to go?
Okay, we want to welcome everybody to our South Weaver City Council meeting at a little after 6 p.m. Today is June 27th, 2023. We're going to begin this meeting with the pledge by Councilman Soderquist, and then we'll have a prayer by Councilwoman Alberts.
Stand and repeat after me.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are so very grateful to be able to meet together as a city council and mayor and citizens for our beautiful city. We pray that as we talk about the issues that are within our city, that we will be able to be writing our decisions and think for their future and work together and pray for all those that are emergency personnel and pray that they will be able to continue to work in safety and that they will know of our appreciation and gratitude for them. May the Holy Father very much in the name of Jesus Christ.
Okay, we'll begin tonight with our public comments. If you've got a comment, we'd ask you to come up to the podium, speak into the microphone, tell us your name and the city that you're from, and we'll open it up for public comments.
Paul Sturm, South Weaver City. In the format that I've been using recently, what I've done is captured the actual pieces out of the packet itself. First thing I would like to talk about is the authorization limits for purchases. The key point here is in the last sentence. Purchases over $10,000 are exempt from city council approval when the supplies, services, or construction materials have been previously listed and approved in the current fiscal budget. My comment on that, expenses more than $10,000 with no upper limit and would include purchases over $25,000 as per the chart below. And already approved by the city council, a body duly elected by the citizens of South Weaver City in the current fiscal budget may or may not need city council approval as stated above. These expenditures, once made, should be reported to the city council for their fiduciary responsibility of tracking South Weaver City budgeted expenditures. Second one has to do with 2-1-060, standard procurement processes. In this table, there was one thing that really stuck out to me, and that was the last number in the spreadsheet there. It has a plus sign. Please note this plus sign. Is there a limit to what this value is? My comments on this is, how can in excess of 25,000 amount be exempt from city council approval? Ordinance 2-1-060, paragraph B2L states that city council approval is necessary. And it's under large purchases, the bidding procedures, and the award. In this case, it says that the city council must review the purchases. Also, please more fully explain the term exempt, since it appears to have conflicting meanings in various portions of this proposed ordinance. 2308, City Code Title II, Chapter 1, Procurement, its documents. I believe these changes should be more fully evaluated for potential impacts and conflicting statements. Also, please assess the seemingly conflicting approvals and values shown in paragraphs 2-1050 and 2-1-060 when spending South Weaver City money. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Hi, James Durant, South Weaver City resident. I live in Cedar Cove, HOA, and I have an HOA issue I wanted just to bring up with you. I think so. As you know about, I think it's probably been 25 years, 26 years that development went in, and for like 22 years, the HOA maintained about between a half acre and probably 3/4 of an acre of the park up on that hill area. Anyways, when it came to my attention that was happening, I'm served on the HOA board. I'm the resident there. I'm currently the manager there. I met with Dave. Dave remembers 2 or 3 years ago, we went up there, looked at the property line, and we identified, all right, you guys will maintain up to this fence post, and the HOA will do the other part. And so anyways, it's been touch and go as far as maintaining, even mowing. I caught Blake out there today. He was the mow crew guy. And I walked up there and I'm like, Blake, let me show you. Hold up the flat metal. Show him this, this is where you're mowed to. Okay, well, tell me what. So this street, perfect. They hadn't been mowed at all. And then the grass is just dead. And there's parts that haven't been repaired. And it's dying and it needs water. And we just, spent $250 replacing that outdoor timer. I have a key, because here's the issue, is that there's an outdoor timer box, and it's on the common area. It's on the walking trail right by Cambridge Crossing Apartments, right? There's a lock on it. I have a key for the city, or anything like it. And so there's 5 zones for the HOA on that timer box, and then there's 4 for the city. Well, when I was up there with Blake, I'm like, who's your sprinkler guy? Give me Jared's number. I called Jared, left a message, talked to him later. He said I talked with Mark O'Brien and was told that since the water timer is on the HOA, they don't have access to it, and pipes on the HOA property, they're not going to maintain it, and all they're going to do is mow. Well, for for a lot of years, 22 years, we mowed it, we fertilized it, we weed controlled it, we did the sprinkling system, and now the past 3 years, it's just nothing's been, not a whole lot of maintaining's been done. HOA or the city's mowed just parts of it. So he told me, that's what they told me, we're not gonna do it, I'm not gonna get there, I'm not gonna fix this in the sprinkler, so I'm here just to ask the city to, I can reach out, send an email to whoever over the parks and Dave today, that please just maintain, if you own it, which you do, right, can you please maintain the park property? And if that means we have to share a timer, we'll be good neighbors with you. I'll give you a key, you can have access to it and get in there and you can maintain it, and we'll work together and willing to do that. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else with comments? If not, we'll move on to our action items. We're gonna move item number 9 and number 10 to the top of the list and take care of them first. So resolution number 2328, insurance and sale of lease revenue bond, series 2023. If you'd like to come up, or does anyone have any comments on that or discussion that you'd like to have on this bond proposal?
Yes, Mayor, we do have a few things I think that might
Okay.
provide some background before proceeding.
So what's before you is the city council is asked to approve the issuance of the bonds by the municipal building authority. And I've made a presentation that's probably more appropriate for the municipal building authority section of this as it relates to the parameters resolution. When we go into the MBA, the local building authority meeting. I don't know if you want to hear that right now, or if you'd prefer to wait till we go to the local building authority. There's should be a sample lease agreement in the package that the city would enter into with the LBA that would provide for the payment of the bond payments through the lease of the building and associated property. Anything else to add to that, Brandon? No.
We need to approve it both in city council and in the other meeting, so.
If we don't
Before
hear-
approving it,
if
do
we
you
can
want to hear it
approve
now?
Let's hear it now, and then we'll be quick in the other meeting.
Okay. So. Just a short presentation about what the parameters resolution does, or what's the purpose of it, and then discussion on different methodologies of how the bond might be sold. So the purpose of the parameters resolution that you'll be considering as the board of the LBA is it puts boundaries on the those working with the issuance of the bond as to the maximum amount of the bonds that can be issued, the maximum term for which those bonds can be issued for, the maximum interest rate that the council or the board is approving the bonds to be issued at, and the maximum discount which bonds can be sold at. And that's really only relevant if you're in a market sale environment. You sell the bonds below face value if the associated interest rate is not comparable to what the market would demand, but it only allows you to discount it just a small amount. It also authorizes the posting of a notice, which is done on the city's website now, and the public meeting notice website that's all your agendas are posted on. And it scheduled a public hearing, which would be in a month from now, let's say the 25th of July. And as proposed, it delegates authority to the city manager to approve the final terms and conditions of the bonds, provided they're within the parameters established by the council. and it delegates the authority of the city manager to determine the sale methodology. That's what's proposed by bond counsel. If the council's uncomfortable with that, they could have someone else fill that role. The order that is in the resolution as currently proposed is the city manager would have that authority. If he's not available, it would defer to the finance director. And if he's not available, then it would defer to the mayor as to who would make those decisions. Let's see, next slide. So I've had ongoing conversations with Dave about, what's the sale methodology that the city thinks best meets their needs. And we may have discussed this over a year ago when I came and made a presentation about the different types of bonds that could be issued. And I think we came to the conclusion that a lease revenue bond probably best fit this transaction because we have multiple sources of revenue that would be paying for this facility. And so there's two ways to sell in the public market. And the first one, and the one which Zions Bank favors in most circumstances, a competitive sale. And a market sale typically will offer a lower interest rate in a competitive environment and lower underwriter spreads, which means the fee that they will charge you to market the bond, to find a purchaser of those bonds, there's usually like a $3 fee per $1,000 worth of bond, something in that range. You don't have to put out an RFP for an underwriter because they compete for the right to sell your bonds. And you match the underwriter with their appetite for bonds at the time. And it's done on an electronic platform. All the bids come in simultaneously, and it ranks those in order of what's the best combination of interest rates and costs to sell the bond. The disadvantages is once you establish that date for when the bids are due, it's not as flexible. It's harder to dictate the parameters of the bond as far as coupon structure, if they want to have higher coupon bonds or lower coupon bonds, which is the associated interest rate that is with each maturity. And they're less inclined to spend a lot of effort in advance trying to find purchasers of the bond if they aren't positive that they're going to be the actual winner of the bid. The next option on a market sale is a negotiated sale. And that gives you more flexibility in the sell timing because you engage the underwriter before the bonds are sold. You put out an RFP that asks them to submit their qualifications with the type of bonds that you're wanting them to market. And they'll typically give you indicative spreads as to what kind of differences between what we call municipal market data, MMD rates, and what the ultimate yields on the bonds will be. And that's one of the things that we look at very closely, is to make sure that those proposed spreads seem reasonable in light of what current market conditions are. And they do vary. Sometimes the spreads are narrower and sometimes they're wider, depending on conditions of the market. It's uncommon to do a competitive sale when you have bonds in excess of $250 million, and oftentimes you might have co-managers or a syndicate that would market the bond, more than one underwriter. Disadvantages is you have to choose the underwriter in advance and assume that their pricing will and spreads that they're proposing will be similar to what their initial proposal was. They're usually a little bit higher spreads because they're not as competitive. It isn't as competitive a process, and then there's just time and involved in going through the process of selecting the underwriter after they submit their proposals and trying to determine what's the best match for the bonds that are to be sold. the last option I'll discuss is a direct purchase. And the advantages of direct purchase is you can obtain pricing quicker because you're not going through the bond rating process. You're not having to develop an official statement that would be basically the document that would allow underwriters to learn enough about the bond and the community that's selling those to where they have enough information that a prudent investor would want. And you don't have to pay an underwriting fee.
I have a clear question.
Please.
So, quicker pricing, when you say quicker pricing, what does that
Um,
timeframe look like versus other options?
I could probably have bids to purchase your bonds within 2 weeks. And versus going through the rating process and developing the official statements, probably more like 60 days from right now, if we had clear direction as to what direction the city wanted to go with the sell the bonds. And so last year, interest rates were rising at a very rapid rate, at least through October, was kind of when they plateaued. And in many conditions, we sold a lot of bonds via direct purchase because we could get a rate today that would be equivalent to or possibly even lower than what the market would be offering 60 days from that time. And right now, we find ourselves in a situation to where we think we're close to the plateau of where interest rates are going to be. The Fed has indicated that they're maybe going to have 1 or 2 more movements in the overnight lending rate. But we expect that soon it will plateau, and hopefully by beginning in 2024, that we'll start to see those interest rates decline. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the significant disadvantage, well, one more advantage is they typically have more flexible call provisions. And what a call provision is, your right to prepay or refinance or refund the bonds. Typically in a market transaction, you're not able to refinance the bonds if interest rates decline for a 10-year period. You could maybe shorten that a little bit, but it comes at a cost. You'll have a higher interest rate associated with the issuance of the bonds. In a direct purchase, you typically would have more options that would provide flexible call features, such as callable at any time, and you can refinance it at any time, or maybe 2 or 3 year call protection before you could consider doing a refinancing the bonds if interest rates declined where there was enough savings to justify it. As the disadvantages is you're going to be paying a higher interest rate to go with a direct placement. It's one buyer versus a myriad of buyers that have different needs in the market as to what their investment policy would dictate, whether they're interested in short-term bonds or long-term bonds and the like. And admittedly, in talking to David, I think he's comfortable that this bond would be sold in a 20-year term versus something longer, but anything beyond 20 years is very difficult to find banks who are willing to commit their capital for a period longer than that.
For any of the 3 options? Is that
No, in the direct purchase.
okay?
So let me just talk a little bit about, maybe what the goals of the city are with this financing. Are you trying to provide flexibility in your debt portfolio long-term? And maybe that is, do you want more flexible call features to where you have the ability to refinance or refund those loans sooner than 10 years? Is there something in the future that you would maybe want to issue additional debt that you may want to combine with a refunding? Do you have a constrained cash flow looking forward that really that causes you to want to structure the debt payments on something other than a level annual payment? Some may be accelerated up front, or some may be ascending to where the payments get higher over time. And lastly, is your goal just to take the best available day, rates are available today versus what might be available in the future. You know, the bird in the hand versus two in the bush. Admittedly, there's lots of people with opinions about what the future holds, but I can't guarantee that any of them are right. We can tell you what historically you might expect, but I can't guarantee anything. So I just wanted to show you this. This is a Fed rate projections. On the right-hand side, this is what the projections were for the Fed funding rates in 2022. In June, so a year ago, this is what people saw interest rates doing. And be mindful that the scales on both sides of the screen are not the same. The ones on the left side start peak out at 6%, and the ones on the right side peak out at 4.5%. So their estimate was that interest rates in 2023 would be lower than what they actually are right now. A year ago, that they've increased more than anticipated. Peaking in 23 and starting to decline in 24. And on the left side, you see what the projections are now, that they anticipate, some anticipate that rates might continue to rise. But starting in 2024, they would expect those rates to start declining and decline even further in 2025. So that's what gives us pause as to should a direct purchase be considered, with the thought in mind that its projections are that interest rates will decline in the next few years, where there might be an opportunity to refinance the bonds at a lower rate with credit savings. Problem is you pay more upfront by going with a direct purchase in hopes that you can recoup more than that through refinancing in the next 2 or 3 years.
And I know you can't give me an exact answer, but how big of a difference is it between a market or the competitive? I mean, is it a 1% difference? And maybe we don't have to make that full decision tonight. I don't know. We do.
Dave, do you
don't
have
to
that
make
chart?
that decision tonight, no.
That chart that we looked at earlier, do you have that we can put
Yeah.
up?
So I've been doing some research with our analysts, and we ran some indicative rates at a week ago at a 20-year bond for something that was at $10 million. And I don't think the bond size really is going to change the interest rate per se. And that's kind of a worst case scenario as to how much the city would borrow. And that was a little less than 3.7% is what we anticipated. I looked at your what the market would look at from a bond rating standpoint and put it in our model, and the community looks very strong from a bond rating standpoint because of your high median incomes and your high taxable values per capita. So our expectation is you'd probably see a bond rating somewhere in the AA range if we went through the rating process. So 3.7% is what rates would look like right now. You know, 60 days from now, that could be higher, that could be lower. In talking with direct purchasers, I've gotten comments of 4.4 to 4.7%. We would have possibly 2-year call protection and some with no call protection. That would be willing to look at the 20 plus. One would look at a 20-year, 25-year. The other would not. 20 years, I think they would both seriously look at. So you're talking right now, I'm guessing about 0.7%. This is an example I have here of an analysis we did for Timpanogos Special Service District back in February. They had bond proceeds of about $33 million for a bond that was sold in April. This was kind of our, at the time, estimated as to what those direct purchase rate would be, about 3.9, and a market sell about 3.5%. I think the direct purchase was probably maybe too aggressive in what it would have turned out. But what this shows is, and I can't read it from here, but on a direct placement, I think it suggests that if you didn't refund it at all, it would cost you about $51 million in total principal and interest payments over the life of the bond. On a market sale, I think it's like 49 million, if there was no refunding at all. The third scenario is if you were in a position to refund the bond in 3 years at a lower rate, which was representative, what was the average rate over the last 5 years? That was the rate that we used, and that takes it down to $48 million.
Can I point out that that was not on a $10 million bond? That was on a much different size of bond.
Yeah, 33 million in proceeds. So,
Just to reemphasize that. We're not looking at 51.
yeah, I don't want anybody to get scared. These are not your numbers. And the fourth column is what happens if you waited 10 years when the call protection on the market sale was no longer in place, and you're able to refund it again at the average market rates for the last 5 years. You're down to $47 million in principal and interest. And the last column suggests that you would refinance a direct placement twice and potentially get it down to 46 million. Now, those are all hypothetical situations, but those are the assumptions that were made when we did this analysis. So there is some reason to give consideration to it, but the spreads, I think, right now are wider between a market and a direct placement sale than what they were in April. So the savings may not be as great as what's represented here.
So just to reiterate, the market sale can refinance after 10 years?
Yes,
After 10. Okay.
You have to wait 10.
you can pay it off or refinance it. You don't, or
You can still pay off.
You could pay ahead or,
you can pay it off after 10 years. Call protection prohibits you from prepaying or refinancing during that time period. Those are all the slides that I had. So if there's any other questions before you give consideration to your agenda items, I'd be happy to address them now or as you get further into those discussion items.
Can I add just two additional pieces of information? One of those is when you set the parameters tonight with this resolution, you're not locking yourself into actually bonding. It authorizes the next steps, but it doesn't officially bond yet, right? There's other steps that we'll go through, or if the project came back and the costs were such that we said, wait, we're not proceeding right now, or whatever other unforeseen circumstances, you're not locked into the bond. This is just simply establishing the parameters, and then typically a city would issue bonds based on that parameters within about a year. So if it went longer than a year, then you'd probably want to do a new parameters resolution at that time. Or if things change such where you didn't want to proceed, then you would do a second or an updated parameters resolution if you felt like those parameters weren't appropriate.
So as David indicated, there's no obligation to borrow money. This just starts the legal process that's required by the state of Utah, that cities are required to go through to issue bonds. And the next step is the public hearing allows the public to come in and express opposition to or support for the issuance of the bond.
Okay. Anyone have questions?
I have a
I'd
couple,
like to ask? Okay, Glenn?
and maybe it comes later once you figure out which direction we're going, but the practicality, the actual way that it is assessed, is it per household?
No, this is not tied directly to individual households at all. It is just tied to the overall city ability to pay. It's very different than a general
Right, but-
obligation.
I guess I'm looking at, once we issue the bond, we get a $10 million bond or whatever we agree to. At that point, then we start taking revenue from where? All the different areas? It doesn't,
From all of the different funds that are tied into the project, meaning the Public Works Department has touch points to almost all of our different funds. So the general fund is the streets and parks. So the general fund and any capital projects that are associated with streets and parks, that fund would be accessible. The water, the sewer, the storm drain, the sanitation, any of the impact fees associated with those that are attributable to growth, this project attributable to growth. There's a lot of different pots of money that can be drawn from to pay this off. There's not just one source.
It all runs downhill, and the bottom line is the residents are paying for it one way or another.
It's by our, it's
Right.
our fee schedule.
Right.
It's
So our fee
changed.
schedules have to go up. So the question follow on that is that per household? Because all the fee schedules are currently per property site, correct?
When you say fee schedule, you're just talking the monthly utility rate fee schedule and property
they're all
tax
different
rates,
then.
all of the different fees that we charge, yeah, are by utility connection and or by property and property tax.
Right. So the scenario I threw out earlier was if we have an extra 500 residents or an extra 1,000 residents in the next 5 years, then they're paying that same fee. So we're actually getting more money in than we are today at the issuance of the bond. So are we reducing fees so we stay the flat rate, or are we getting more so that we're having more income, but we can't pay it off sooner? So therefore, we're just gathering it until we can.
Once we bond, we're given a payment schedule. And there's an exact payment due every year. Well, there's two payments due every year. One is interest only and one is principal and interest. And so we would have that schedule of payment. And once you've bonded, you can use whatever funds available to the city to actually pay it off. When you bond, you pledge a certain revenue stream saying we have the money to pay this off, which the analysis that staff has done and Mac mostly is that we have the funds to take care of this. If you remember going back to our budget retreat, the discussion of do we have to raise money, raise fees for this, or can we delay other projects and have this become the priority project? We can cover the bond payments at a $10 million bond with the delaying projects process. So it's not directly attributable to any increased fee or tax. Does that mean there would not be a need in the future? Not necessarily. And that was maybe a triple negative and made it very unclear. So there will always be the conversation about the needs of the city. But as far as the service level today, we have the ability to pay the bond with the parameters that are in front of you.
Thank you.
Did that answer or did that create more questions?
But I think that's why the consolidated fee schedule and the utilities, everything has to be reviewed, because as say you get a new 100 houses and homes, residents in that, and as they review those, they're gonna divide that by the increased number. And if it needs to be raised to cover what our expenses are, then they, just like we've done with the sewer and the storm drain, otherwise it's going to stay the same. But if not enough move-ins or whatever are coming in, I don't know that it's just gonna be excess cash coming in, as long as we continue to review that. Right. If we stop reviewing it and just leave it at the higher rate, then yeah, it would be excess. But some of those projects have to be done eventually, and so the fees have to be there.
I'll just add that when the last fee schedules or fee rate studies were done with our utilities, this project was part of those, looking at where the rates would need to be. And as we do these studies every 5 to 7 years on capital facilities and our rate studies, we look at over that time period. When we know the total cost of the bonds, it'll be divided between the various departments, funds that need to pay. And when every rate study that is done from this point on, will have their payment, whether it's over 20 years or 25 years, whatever it is, will be part of that analysis. Whether that means an increase in fees, that's to be seen, because those fees are also based on projects for the next 10 years and growth estimates. But I think when we did it last time, we used a figure of 8 million, not 10 or
I think it might have been
6, or it wasn't the full 10, but there was a portion of this was built into our current rates. And we're currently in the process of reviewing all of our rates, as well as our capital facility plans, and updating that. So these figures, what we're talking about tonight will be part of those and will come to the council when you analyze where we need to be on our fees.
Thank you.
I just want to ask, Carl, I think that the next hurdle is determining what amount of money the city needs to borrow in order to complete the project as you get better cost estimates.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? You got anything else you'd like to say, Dave?
Nope.
Okay.
Just a quick question. So if we did go on with a $10 million borrow for 25 years, we're talking $4 or $5 million in interest. According to the paperwork that's shown down here. Our total principal plus interest, when direct purchase type of bond, we're looking at 15 million for 15,899. Is that something that's?
Yeah, so, end of last week, Mark sent me an email, with some indicative rates and a couple of summaries. I sent that over to the council. Yes, so the total principal and interest payment over the life of the bond obviously is more than the 10 million because you're paying the interest over that time. So 20-year marketplace is about 14.3 million total principal and interest. 20-year direct purchase, 15.8, and then it has the others in there as well. So you're looking at that correctly.
So we're borrowing the 10 million, we're basically going to be going around 15 million for the final pay, for the total payoff at the entire time. And so the city is taking on a $15 million debt, and each year we will be making a set payment.
Yes,
So
the,
really, it doesn't matter how many people move in or out, except for the collection speed of which we would be then, I assume we're talking about taking all that additional money, and then after the 10 years, either doing a refi or doing a prepay to try to get it down and out of there as quickly as possible.
exactly right. In that chart where it says average DS, debt service is what that stands for. That's the annual payment amount. Yeah. You're exactly right. That's our payment, and it would be over the life of the bond. And the more people move in, or more sales tax is generated through economic development, or more whatever revenue comes in, or sale of assets, or whatever it may be, could all go toward payment of those bonds.
So the other thing to keep in mind is,
Can you speak into the mic just for those watching online?
another thing to keep in mind is when you finance a project, you fix your construction costs up front. And what may, $15 million over 20 years versus what does it cost if you wait 5 more years to do the project? And, what we could have done things for 5 years ago versus what we could do it right now. Financing would be a very good option.
So on that, on an annual basis, basically, we're looking at
$706,000 for the one, 783 for the highest.
We would have to be coming up at the start of the project, that in years, you have to have a $700,000.
Yes,
And you're telling me that that's covered right now, and it's not going to impact it without that changing the fee.
correct.
If we don't do any other project.
Yeah, if you don't do any other projects, if you don't,
Right.
or anything comes up for right now.
There's-
That's
There would be a few projects that would still be done, right? But as we went through the budget process, that was kind of the underlying assumption that we're not planning any projects this year, recognizing that bonding would happen at some point and we would have, a payment due at that point. And so you're right. We're essentially saying all of the capital facilities plans that we've had to this point and the projects that we need to do, we're putting this public works building and facility at the front of the line. And the money that we have collected for those types of infrastructure projects, we need to take care of this project first.
So right now on our budget, we just asked for an additional 3% of the storm drain projects. Are you saying that's not going to be going to pay off this bond if we go on bond?
Not all of the storm drain projects, but some that were planned for would be diverted to this, just like the other capital facilities plans, yes.
and you feel comfortable saying that, knowing the budget that we did this year, next year, increasing the rate, we could hold and still pay the additional $700.
Max said yes. I take more of the Mark Anderson approach that there are a lot of opinions on what'll happen in the future, and I can't guarantee which one's right. Yeah.
It depends on how we prioritize the project.
Yeah.
It comes from here.
I'm just saying that because we're taking the assumption that everything's going to be able to be paid off at that time. It's just surprising that we have the ability to be able to check that out. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
The collection of all of the different projects that are done each year among all the different funds typically, covers that. That's what we're saying, is that by not doing other projects that we normally do according to schedule and plan, capital facilities plan, that we can insert this and that there's money to take care of that.
Purchase of new, maintenance equipment.
That's separate from vehicles. That's separate from,
The only thing, when I did the analysis, I was looking at the capital facilities plan on major projects. And when they were scheduled, and we all sat down together and said, which ones could be delayed? Now, and we were trying to come up with $1 million a year. So if it's less than that, and over this time, maybe some of those projects we'd reshuffle them. And maybe it would be a stormwater project in 1 year to pay the $700,000. The next year, it might be a water project that was scheduled for that year that would be delayed. It's not, there's a lot of ways to look at it, and we'll bring that analysis back to the council. The hardest part was not knowing the bond amounts, the total amounts, or knowing the total of the project. But I do feel comfortable that yes, by doing delays, it's not money that's sitting there, not to just waiting to find an expense. But by delaying some of these larger projects, yes, the money will be there.
Any other items to discuss? If not, then we'll look for a motion on this resolution.
All right, Mayor, make a motion. We approve resolution 23-28, issuance of and sale of lease revenue bonds series 2023.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll begin with a roll call vote by Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 Does this include the part about the city council, the city manager being in charge? That's what for how many things we want to do about it. Okay. Aye.
Okay. Vote is unanimous. Thank you. We need to suspend our council meeting and go in and convey into our LBA board meeting.
So
Need
moved.
a motion to
Second.
do that. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have one item. It's resolution LBA 23-02. What's that? Tell me that word.
Hang on.
Issuance.
Issuance.
I'm sorry, I was.
Issuance and sale of lease revenue bond series 2023. We've just been discussing. Any other discussion on this?
Wait, that's what I just did. Where did that on?
It's the same
No,
one.
it's the same.
You read
Have
it?
to do it in
You
both
read it?
meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you did it once. Do you want to do it again?
You want to do it again?
Sure, I'll do it again. Thanks. Mayor, I move to approve resolution, oh, no, not Mayor, Chairman. I move to approve LBA resolution 23-02, issuance and sale of lease revenue bonds series 2023.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote, starting with board member Fields.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move back into our council meeting. We have a motion to do so.
So moved.
What's that?
Second.
Oh, yeah, you have to vote on that.
Oh.
You're the chairman, remember?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Okay.
so moved. Move back to
moved.
council meeting.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second to reconvey back to city council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Haley.
Haley,
Mayor, do you want to move,
yes,
the, so
Yes.
the sheriff can go
Yes.
as well?
Quinn,
Quinn did. So being how we're jumping all around tonight, we're gonna do one more jump. We're gonna go to item number 7. We've got the sheriff here and we appreciate his time and I'm sure he'd rather, or probably not rather, but is needed elsewhere. So we'll move into resolution 23-26, interlocal cooperation agreement with Davis County for law enforcement. And he just,
Page 43 is the, brief summary.
what's that?
just finding it in the packet.
Oh, okay. So, any discussion or questions on, this agreement with the sheriff's department?
I'd just like a little clarification on the third year, the 2025 year, where we basically get it recalculated at that time. We don't have any option at that point to say no. If it comes in high, I wouldn't expect it to, but I mean, basically, we're writing a blank check at this point, saying we'll pay whatever they want with.
The idea is that we are on the hook for the full cost. And each year, just
Right.
like dispatch would do a calculation saying, here's the actual call volume and whatnot. The sheriff's office each year will do a calculation for the true cost to them of providing the service. If they have wage changes or things like that, that would change that patrol unit cost, then those types of things would be calculated. But once we get to that full cost over the 2-year ramp up period, because they're giving us some time to get to that, then in theory, they should not significantly change year to year at that point. But there is not an estimate of that third year in the agreement.
Right, but the second year, if their costs go up, they come back and tell us, hey, it was a little bit more, and then we pay the extra, correct?
Yes, the idea is from this point out, there would be an annual addendum
Right.
that would just simply change the dollar figure.
So they'd have to, I mean, they'd provide that dollar figure. And
So we're not locked into any of these because it could change depending upon the market and whatnot. So we're just basically saying, this is what we think it's gonna be. We'll readdress at the time.
Yes.
And that's why I just wondered why not throw one in on the third one. On the third year. I mean, it's an estimate on year 2, so it'd be an estimated on year 3. I don't know. It doesn't have to. It just seems like it'd be more consistent to at least have something on paper rather than say we'll pay whatever they calculate it to be. Otherwise, you just put that at year 2, we'll pay whatever it's calculated to be in year 2, because that's really what we're doing, correct?
Yes, we could ask for that number. I'm sure that the county could provide that. At the same time, the only reason there's a year 2 number is because we're not paying the full cost this year. And so they're showing what that full cost would be this year if we were paying the full cost, and they're giving us that discount. And so that's where that year 2 cost estimate comes from.
They gave us year 2 cost.
So, yeah,
So
They're basically
So-
only giving us this year's cost, but showing that we're doing portion of the increase this year. And then to get to that full amount, that would be the estimated cost. But it's estimated based on current dollars, not what they estimate
so-
next year's to be.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm fine with the way it's written. I just wanted to understand
okay.
the basis for why it is the way it is.
That's why there's that second year, is because that's this year's full cost. And it will most likely adjust next year to some degree.
Anyone have any other questions? Okay,
So, in the contract itself, how are the, metrics being monitored? So we've got, 2 units in here that are supposed to be 80 hours per week. How is that being monitored? Is that just the report that we get from? Maybe I should have asked the question.
Yeah, Kelly Sparks, Sheriff. So I'm happy to answer that question. The way we monitor those is each day, all of our deputies have to fill out a activity sheet. So in that activity sheet, they will list the areas that they patrolled, what time they spent in the city of South Weber, any incidents that occurred in the city of South Weber. And then we calculate that and can provide that data. In addition, we come to the council, as I think you know, on a quarterly basis. We're happy to do that at whatever frequency the council would like us to do to report those numbers, both of the amount of time that we've spent within the city and the number of incidents and types of incidents that we handled inside the city.
And we love those. The report is wonderful.
We love it too.
So on your end, that means we get the report, at least every 3 months, a reporter right now. Are we watching it, internally and seeing the contract? I hate.
I think Dave gets the report weekly, right? You're getting the
There's,
weekly or monthly figures.
there's a monthly figure that is sent. Just like all the department heads provide monthly reports, we treat Lieutenant Boucher as our, for lack of a better term, our police chief, right? And so he provides that law enforcement department head monthly report as well. Yeah. And I meet with him regularly, at least every 2 weeks to talk to him about performance and what's going on and things like that. And if there's specific problem areas or target areas or things that need to be focused on during the next few weeks. So we have those operational type conversations regularly.
And I would just add that we are happy to accommodate whatever desire the council might have. If you want additional information, more frequent reports, we're happy to accommodate that.
So looking at those numbers, what happens if we don't meet those numbers? Is that spelled out in the contract? So if, say, 3 months, we get 65 hours total, or, average out, per week. Is there anything in the contract that discusses, are we still paying the full amount of fee on that? Is there a back down off of that cost? How is that looked at?
I don't think we've even ever talked about it because most of the time it's been averaging more. And I mean, usually it's in around 110 hours on average. And so that's why it's never even brought up as how we would credit that back. Because then we'd be basically having to set something up on the reverse side of that. So it's never been, and maybe that's my bad for not bringing it up, but it hasn't been
No, I was
discussed.
just wondering, because I know that, with
Right.
all of our previous numbers, they've all been with,
With an
paramedic. So now with that service out of it, watching that go down, I just make sure we have some internal monitoring.
I would say that for the last year, it hasn't had the paramedic with it.
I remember discussing this. We would just talk about, watching those monthly reports, and if they're dipping below, then they just bump it back up.
Then we call the sheriff.
Yeah,
Mhm.
give me a call.
Yep.
Roll.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, that's what they're agreeing to do, so they'll make sure that that's where they're here at a minimum.
And I know you probably all know this already, but I would just also emphasize that what you're paying for is the patrol hours. What you're getting is much more than that. In addition to the patrol hours, I would estimate that our investigators probably spent somewhere near 200 hours last year investigating crimes that occurred within the city, handling incidents that happened within the city. That includes our detectives, our crime lab folks, our victims advocates, our criminal data analysts. There's a lot that goes into providing law enforcement service that's in addition to patrol. So I think it's just important that we have that in as well.
I agree, and I think that's one of the things we always see with the quarterly reports, especially with the addition now of the data analysts coming in. Yeah. These questions have nothing to do with whether, you're quality or caliber.
I appreciate that.
It's more, contractual wise. Sheriff Sparks is an amazing man. If you ever decide to move on to someplace else on contract, if you will match.
Yeah.
What our needs are, and just the individual that we do.
Okay. Anyone else?
I
Ask for a motion.
Appreciate all the time. This is a long time coming, so
Yeah.
thank you, everybody.
And we appreciate, it's been wonderful working with you.
Yes,
I mean, and the transparency's been awesome since you've been in.
Thank you. We really enjoy working, in South Weaver, only South Weaver. It's something that obviously the sheriff's office has done ever since South Weaver's been a city.
That's right.
So, and it means a lot to us, and it's a great tradition that we have at the sheriff's office, so we appreciate it.
We appreciate you, Sheriff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Movement, or motion. Approve. 2326, the local cooperation agreement with data for law enforcement.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll begin with a roll call vote by Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, unanimous on this
Thank you.
voting. Well, thank you, Sheriff. Ordinance,
Thank
2023-08, City Code Title II, Chapter 1, Procurement. I think we want some discussion on this, so we'll open that up.
So, thank you, Mayor. My question is, the reasoning behind removing city council requirements for approval. I have items written down for you to discuss, and Paul also brought it up. So, from the Finance and Admin Committee, I'm assuming where this originated, if you just get information on what the reasoning was.
Yeah, I'll just give a brief background and let Dave explain some more details about it, but we go through bids and budgeting and stuff and say, we're gonna do this later in the year and everything, and so we already have a pre-identified budget. And then sometimes it just delays things if we, have to wait 2 weeks after they finally get the real bid in. Sometimes we're going 3 weeks or a whole month before we have another meeting, so then they have to wait, or we have to have a special thing, and so part of the reason was, if it's already been pre-approved by us, then do they need to have to come back and say, okay, we're still doing it? And then it's a good point has been brought up, maybe we change our mind. It may be 6 months from now where it comes up and stuff like that. So Dave, you want to talk to the other reasons behind this recommendation?
Can I
from
just
staff?
ask a quick question though
Yeah.
to follow up with that? And maybe this is a Jamie question, and I brought it up when you said maybe we change our mind, but I mean, every public utility board, every city that I'm aware of still has this for larger change orders, still has this for, even though it may be budgeted, they still have this. And so why are we being different? And I think that's the root of all of our questions, is I kind of saw that as once you reach a certain threshold, that it should still be there.
So one point of clarification that was brought up earlier in public comment, this is for those purchases between $10,000 and $25,000. It's not for the purchases above $25,000. Anything that's above $25,000 requires a certain procurement process. We're not changing that.
I get that. We just barely went to 10. So that's why I'm seeing, so what is the need to go from 10 to 25? And yet that 10 threshold is a pretty common threshold in a lot of areas, and not, and a lot of areas, a lot bigger with a lot more issues than us to deal with.
This is totally up.
Sorry.
This is totally up to the city council on your comfort level. But the most recent example that I can, that comes to mind is the Cherry Farms ball field project. It was, budgeted at $15,000 after it was amended, right? And then instead of staff just going and doing the project, we had to come back to council to say, are you okay with us doing the project? Right? And actually taking that second step. So this isn't trying to take away the council's authority or authorization. It's trying to say that authorization happened during the budget process when it was identified as a need and the council said, we want to put money toward it. Yes, there could be changes, but and things like that. But the idea was that the council's made that decision and put money toward it. When there's an actual need to go through a bidding process and award a bid, that is identified at over $25,000, the large purchases in the procurement policy. If it's underneath that, what it's said is it goes through the small purchase procurement process, but it has to go back to the city council for the authorization to spend the money. So it's a two-step process. Put the money in the budget and then authorize the spend of that money. And we're trying to just say, why not do that in one step? When you authorize the budget, authorize the spend of that budget. Because every other item in a budget is authorized to spend once it's budgeted.
And you're talking specifically authorizing the spend in that example, as in the bidding, the bids all came in, the supplier was chosen, and that meant that a check had to be written for that amount at that time. Is that why you're saying that it had to come back to city council?
Right, it had to be ordered and authorized to actually proceed with the project. And by procurement policy, that had to go to the city council to say, yes, you can go do the project. Where again, it was already budgeted, the council said, we're okay with it. It's just a two-step process. This would make it a one-step process. But again,
Yeah,
it's totally up to the
a check
council.
wasn't written, but a contract had to be issued.
Right. Right.
I appreciate the explanation. I still feel like I don't want to keep it. I'm happy to keep it because there may be times that we do change our mind, or we may not be aware that this project has even come up, and then it could get, it makes it more transparent for everybody, makes the public more aware of what we're doing. So I feel more comfortable leaving it in the council approved stuff.
I just had a question. So usually when this, in times, at least when we get more bids, we would get, 3 or 4 bids, and you guys would give us a recommendation, and then we choose the bid. If we go with this route, does that mean that you guys would just make the choose the bid of, because if it comes in at different amounts, you guys would just go ahead and choose that, and the council would not, correct?
If it's under $25,000 and over 10,000, yes.
Okay.
Right now, we do that for anything under $10,000.
What if it's a larger contract, but you're dealing with change orders in between that amount?
So the change order is identified in a different section of the procurement policy. And what it states is that first, the city staff is never able to spend money above what's budgeted. But if we receive a bid for a project and let's say it's under budget, and then there are change orders, it identifies 20% within our procurement policy as the threshold that staff could approve a change order as long as it's still under the overall budget. If it at any point is above 20% in a change order or above budget, those go to council as it's written currently.
As
And
written
that's not-
currently,
Sorry.
It's not changing tonight. That's not,
That's what I thought.
yeah, that's not being considered to change. I will point out, when you get to the point of making a motion either to approve or deny, this is not the only change. There's a second change in there, and that's just about noticing that state law no longer requires newspaper publishing. And so we wanted to pull that out because that's typically been costly and not that effective. So
One of the other things I still have on this is that, while it specifically just says exempting the city council approval when previously listed and approved in the current fiscal year. I'm more comfortable with that if it says something to the effect of specifically listed, so that we know, for example, this wouldn't be part of the parks project, this wouldn't be part of the park maintenance, or any of those kind of things. It would have to specifically say, we're approving to have $11,000, such a Cherry Park Farm or Cherry Farms Park to be able to do the reseed.
That would be under a capital project, right? I mean, typically, would this usually fall under?
this
capital
would be
project?
generally equipment or capital projects, things like that. But any large purchase or any purchase over $10,000 that doesn't hit that large purchase $25,000 threshold and require a different procurement process, that's the window that we're talking about.
And just for clarification, our intent is not, if it's just generally in the budget, that doesn't apply. For example, under capital projects, if we had listed a tiller for 15,000, specifically listed a particular piece of equipment, and it's approved in the budget, then once we go to buy that, they would not come back for a second time, bringing back that for a second approval from the council. That was the intent. Not if it just says, saying it's something that's going to be in operations line item or in their maintenance things. No, anything over 10,000, that's not specifically. And so those kind of items would not come back, would have to come back to the council under this. And we don't, to be honest with you, if you look over the budget, there's not that many items in the capital projects budget that are specifically outlined. And those are the ones in that category. Those are the ones we're addressing.
Yeah.
That's the intent. Now, if the words don't say that, I'm sorry. That was my intent in the way that I worded it.
The second kind of feeling that I have towards this, though, is that at least in the Constitution, it was made for our government to move very slowly, not very quickly. It was made so that any type of payment or decision took a long time to happen. And I don't want to see this being used for expediency and in any way taking away from the really the responsibility of the city council to monitor the budget and then protect the process.
One thing I would say is if you look at that chart where it shows 10,000 to 24,999 and it says city council authorization, it's still city council authorization. It's when you're authorizing it that we're addressing.
Okay, so for my part, just so we all know where I'm at, I don't actually have a problem with this. And so like, just as Max said, these would be detailed things that we had already approved anyway. But I do think Councilwoman Petty brings up a good point in that it is a little bit more transparent. And I like that because of the bids. I like to know why we're choosing which bid we're choosing and why. I think that's beneficial for the public to see that we're not choosing some good old boys club bid or anything. Not that that is happening, but it does allow a little bit more transparency there. However, that's my catch point, I guess. I just like the transparency of those bids being discussed because that is helpful as a citizen to see why you chose a specific person. So it's not necessarily about the amount, it's just being a little bit more transparent that way. However, I do see the intent of being able to, it is a little redundant, I would admit, in my perspective.
I guess I would say to that, because you're right, it is a little redundant, but if we know we're buying a filler and we want to buy it in August, that gives us plenty of time to put it on the agenda to make sure in time to secure that. So
Yeah.
I don't see that necessarily being a problem if we've already planned it out.
Maybe one recommendation would be over the next year, just keep track of how often this comes up. Identify any delays or, problems it has. I mean, we've operated under this previously and it hasn't hurt us necessarily that I'm aware of.
I don't think we would need to spend a year. We could just look at what's in the budget that you've already identified in that range that we would have to bring back. And to Max's point, I don't think this happens frequently. It's not a major issue. It was just more identifying the redundancy but it's ultimately entirely up to the council and your comfort level. So.
Is there any way, Amy, that there could be a may instead of a shall type of, so that if there was a situation like we had with the baseball diamond and getting the season, getting the company out there, within a certain type of time frame for it to be able to grow, that it could be listed instead of city manager may authorize this. Some kind of a little bit too flexible, but at the same time, I don't think, like you said, this comes up very often. So, I don't know.
I'm gonna look to David a little bit just because I think the question's one of mechanics, not, you could state whatever you'd like in the ordinance change. But the question I have is,
Who decides the may or the shall?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, when is it a man? When is it a shall?
Yeah.
I think
it would
if
still have to
if
come
the
back to
choice,
council
if
to
the
decide
choice
if it's a may or
is,
shall.
that when an item's presented to the council as a budget amendment or a budget item for a specific project, that at that point in time, the council may, authorize that, may have that be both a budget approval and a procurement approval. Then the council keeps that. The other way you could write it is allow the city manager to decide that, but if I were in David's seat, I don't think I'd want that.
I think language in the policy could say something like the council may at budget approval time identify this as something they want to authorize or allow the city manager to.
Okay, I'm swinging my vote the
Something
other
like
way, because if it doesn't happen very often, I do really like the public to be able to see the bid process and, yeah, I mean, I see that it is redundant, but if it's not a major hurdle, then I don't know that it's necessary.
And not too long ago, we took it from the 2,000 to the 10,000, and I think that was where we had a ton
Yeah.
of things coming
Yeah.
up. And one of my other, I think some of the safeties were put in place not too long ago because of things the city experienced not too long ago.
Sure.
And I'm hesitant to change that.
On the other change in here about, stopping the publishing in newspapers, everybody okay with that portion?
Yeah,
Way too much money.
I read the newspaper every day.
On your tablet, I'm not looking at your ads to see.
The only question I had was, we're saying everything in accordance with the state law. Anyone know what the state law is on this?
Well, the cities have more flexibility than most government entities within the state. So you're not tethered to specific procurement types or methodologies. The caveat with that is once you adopt a procurement procedure, you have to follow it. So you create your own rules and in that regard. And the general guidance is you want your procurements to be competitive as to price and quality, and to be an open and fair process for anybody that participates.
Okay, so we're not locking ourselves into something that's restricted.
Correct.
Mayor, may I move to approve ordinance 2023-08 City Code Title II, Chapter 1 Procurement with the following amendments. To remove or exclude the proposed added sentence in 2-1-050, paragraph C, about the exemption for the city council on approved budget purchases, but with the inclusion of the other language proposed discussing the removal of a need to publish in newspapers.
Okay. A motion and a second. We'll begin with a roll call vote. Councilman Deal.
Aye.
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 Bye.
Okay, motion carries.
Quinn, I think I understand the intent, but it's in that section C, but it's also in 21060 underneath the procurement summary table.
Oh, it's in there as well.
Did you
Okay.
intend to
In both
include
places,
both of those
please.
places?
I amend my motion to remove it from all
Any-
places proposed to be added.
Also second.
Okay, everyone in favor of that?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
21060.
Okay, next item is the public hearing on FY 2023 budget amendment number 2. A motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
I'll second it and then say aye.
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 Okay, public hearing is open. Anyone have any thing they want to bring up at this? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to.
Mayor,
close the
make a
public
motion to
portion.
close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next item, resolution 23-22 FY 2023 budget amendment number 2. Any councilmen have any discussions on this? Councilmen or councilwomen? Everyone okay with what they read in the packet?
Can't read on the glass.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to fight it or. All right, Mayor, I make a motion to approve resolution 23-25 fiscal year 2023 budget amendment number 2.
Okay, a motion, we have a
Second.
second. We got a second. Give us a roll call vote by Councilman Deal.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Next item, resolution 23-27 FY 24 consolidated fee.
Yep. Did you, were you not listening?
Paul Paul fell asleep? Oh,
We did. Just now.
Just now.
You guys
We
are
just
chatting.
opened it and closed it and waited and. asked
We
for
waited and
public
looked at you
comment.
guys. You guys are.
I looked at both of you.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
You'll go with-
Yeah, we are on.
I
8.
crossed it out, so I think. Resolution 23-27 FY 24 consolidated fee schedule. Any discussion on this resolution?
Other than it's specs? No.
So I do have, sorry. And again, we've been talking money, we've been talking bond, we've been talking all these things, and we state that we pass through all of the rate increases for these various fees, and yet we're not passing through all of this. Remind me again why we're not passing through the full amount? Were we overcharging previously?
We are passing through the full amount from those that are increasing what we are paying. And so, for example, we pay for garbage service. There's a collection fee to Robinson Waste. There's also a dump fee to Wasatch Integrated Waste Management. By increasing just one of those, the overall sanitation rate is not it's not the same 5% of a 5% increase from just one of those, right? Because there's more than one fee within what our rate shows on the utility bill. That may not have been a good way to say that, but
So there's many aspects of the total fee, and one portion of it was raised.
One
by
portion of it is
12%,
passed
so
through.
The overall raises only by 7%.
Right.
correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I did just have one more question I remembered. I'm assuming that we're doing deposits at the FAC because it's been needed.
That's something that was talked about in the recreation committee, and that, yeah, I'll let you take it.
One of the big issues that we have now is that we've got a music class being taught in there with a rather nice piano. Which just means that when other people rent that room, we were just liking to have a decent deposit fee that basically said, you're gonna be responsible for what happens in this room.
Okay,
So, yeah.
sounds good. Thank you. Mayor, I make a motion to approve resolution 23-27 fiscal year 24 consolidated fee schedule.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll begin with roll call vote by Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Action item number 11, resolution 23-29, policy and procurement. Or
Procedure.
procedures, excuse me. I need discussion on this pertaining to employment of minors.
I support. Get my kids out of my house and working
There you go.
With certain restrictions.
within those restrictions.
Certain restrictions apply.
Some restrictions may apply.
Mayor, can I make a motion?
Sure.
I move to approve resolution 2329, policy and procedures.
Okay,
A
we have
second.
Liar.
motion
Not
and a
yet. Sorry.
second. We'll begin with the roll call vote by Councilman Deal.
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 12, fraud risk assessment. Any discussion on this?
Other than well done.
Yeah, very good number.
Yeah.
And thanks for getting the
Keep going up.
clarification on
Well done.
the one aspect of the internal audit request, so I appreciate that.
Mayor, I move to accept their fraud risk assessment. Is that it? Is that all I say? Yes.
Second, now.
We need a roll call on this. or just to, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll make sure everybody can hear it.
Okay. Anyone? Anyone have any new business they would like to bring up?
Can staff go back and look at the original development? I'm assuming there's a development agreement on Cedar Cove. Because I know that piece of property's been debated back and forth several times over the years on how it gets, because it is odd that we have a common sprinkler box, main line coming in, and I think we need to take care of it. I just want, it'd be nice to go back and see what the original agreement was and why that was combined, because that's odd.
I know, and we talked about what, 2 years ago?
Two years ago, I was trying to think of the resolution that we came to then.
Yeah, and so I'm curious, and maybe you already know, if, or maybe there was never an agreement. I have no idea. I just don't wanna say, yeah, we'll just go take care of that, if it was something that we made a deal where they're supposed to be taking care of it.
We'll do the research on that and I'll work with James to,
And
And
it's
Parks
very
staff.
well done, and we need to take care of it. It's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Just want
Thank
to
you.
follow up on that, apparently, Councilwoman Parks is still listed as, Councilwoman Parks, sorry, Councilwoman Petty
Because I
is still
won't be
listed
there.
on the park, yeah. So,
It's
Mr.
listed as
Duran's
in
email
part
came
on the
to
website.
Angie and me, instead of Joel and me.
Okay.
On the web.
oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Officially boot her off, I think is what Quinn is trying to say. Polite, ever so polite.
We get tired of her hanging around, no, sorry, I didn't.
She's always peeking in the windows at those meetings, like, "Where's
No, it's very good. I do have one follow, just new business. It's a follow-up on discussion we had before about trying to capture the lessons learned after we had 89 shut down. And we were talking about putting that on a future agenda. Is that slated for an agenda? Where did that die or get put on a shelf? Is staff pulling all that together and then coming to the council, or are we gonna have an open discussion with the council on that?
what do you prefer?
I would like an open discussion, but I also like to hear a lot of details from the staff and our fire department, and everybody that was right in the middle of it all.
Okay.
Because I've heard a lot of things that we did and ran into, but I'd like to try to capture it, so next time anything like that happens, we have a plan in place right up front.
We'll put that on
If
a,
that's okay, Mayor, to have
Yeah.
a future
Let's
discussion.
put that on the agenda.
yeah, knowing that as the frame and how you'd like that to go, we'll arrange that for an upcoming council meeting within the next couple of meetings.
Thank you.
I do have some new business.
Okay.
So we talked about our sound ordinance, and we finally got that done, right? Okay. Can we get some signs on 89? How do we do that? Yes.
We're gonna order some for take break.
We had talked about that. Well, I will get some orders and.
One. See that you do.
Will you make sure? that
We'll
we
just
get-
have to work with
What's
UDOT.
89 there when you built that house?
But I have some residents who really resolve it,
Okay.
so
I'm just checking.
I'm following up.
Yeah, we'll just have to work with UDOT to post them on 89 property.
Thank you.
If I can just add on something to that, we had residents request sound walls and everything when Highway 89 expansion was going from the top of the hill down to Farmington, and they were getting all these sound walls, and we contacted UDOT saying, hey, can we get some sound walls in our area? And they said, unless the road changes, we won't redo the sound thing. So UDOT probably won't help us put up a sign. So do we have the authority to put a sign up on UDOT's road?
We don't.
So they were very adamant that they weren't going to come back and take a noise thing until they actually expand from the top of the hill down in a
They
future
can't.
thing.
I mean, they're in several different city limits, right? 193 is a state road, right?
Well, yeah.
And it has
I
the
think-
noise ordinance enforced
I-
on there, so I would think that they would allow us, right?
We can definitely request it. I'm just,
I thought that, because we had discussed this before,
Yeah, we did.
That-
And they said, yeah.
it's not enforceable. But you can put the sign up,
Yes.
but it's not enforceable. But, and there is a sign, if you get to the top of the hill, Layton City's got one.
Yeah.
We can look at it, but I do think they have different sign standards for different classes of roadways. And so if it's something like 89 or the interstate, I don't believe they allow you to put those kinds of signs up. But if it's a lesser road like the one you were just talking about, I think you can put a sign up, and the mayor's correct that you can signal it, but you're gonna have a hard time enforcing it.
That's all I have.
So we'll follow through with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, committee reports. Joel?
In the recreation department, we've had a very, very successful pickleball tournament. I don't remember who the winner was. Do you know that? No one? There we go.
Oh.
Hey, Michelle.
Wow. Did you play with Paul or no? You did. No.
There you go.
Way to go. It was good.
Good job.
We got 3 different sections, 3 different leagues, and very well. It was a lot of fun.
It was the most successful of our experiment with the adult games. We have looked at what we're going to do going forward with that, see if we're going to do something like that during the winter again, just trying to get some residents that want to have some type of involvement, some lower level activities that they can do without it getting too much of a competitive type. But the pickleball, I think we're going to still have to keep that one pretty competitive.
Can I do a huge shout out to Joe Schoblum on that? She stepped in and helped our rec department. And she was calling people and getting people to sign up. And when she got on board, we had 6 teams signed up. And by the end of it, there were over 50 that signed up. And it's a huge credit to her. She really stepped in and helped our rec department make that successful.
Yeah, that's great.
The other thing is now we're looking at what we're going to do at the rec center itself to keep track of a lot of the monthly memberships and how we're going to be able to increase that number to help offset some of the costs.
Haley?
We did have a code committee meeting today, and just one thing as an item of discussion, or not discussion, but to bring up, we did get an email about the sod swap, what do they call it? Swap the sod the swap?
Buyback.
What? Sod buyback. I like to swap your sod, but anyway, we talked about it in code today, prior to getting that. In order for our city to be eligible, I was thinking complicit, but that was the wrong word. Eligible for that program, we would need to change our code to require no more than 35% turf for any new properties coming in.
Say no more than 35%.
We say 40% needs to be landscape, at least 40% needs to be landscaped, but we don't have a limit on turf. This would require us to put a limit of 35% on turf for our citizens to be eligible. So of your yard, only 35% of it could have turf. Am I saying this correctly?
Yes, and that's
Okay.
for new construction.
New
We'd have to
construction.
require for new construction.
So if we
The only
don't
thing I
want
would
to.
amend is 40% open, not necessarily
Yeah,
40%
open.
landscape.
Yes, that's correct. So in order for us to do this, we would need to basically limit the size of sod. And when we talked about this before, I'm just gonna you. We went back and forth a lot on this about limiting the size of sod. So thoughts, can I ask your thoughts on how you guys feel about that?
You can ask anything.
Just wondering, I'm wondering if code should consider getting ourselves eligible. There is a lot of cities, most of the cities in Davis County have already
We count
gone this
eight-
route.
8 out of the 15 cities that have
I
adopted.
think 42 cities in a state
Limit the amount
of turf.
turf
Grass.
put in. No
In
more
any new
35%.
house? But what if,
No exception.
the
No
tough part
exception.
is what if they're bigger lots?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
And then
that was my problem too.
you have other issues.
What is the city, excuse me, the state, reimbursement?
Up
for
to-
sod buyback?
Up to $3 per square foot.
What?
That you're replacing. So it's, if you rip, they have to come and do site inspection. They look at how much sod you're gonna be ripping out, and then they'll give you up to $3 per square foot to add a cap. I can't remember what the total cap is on that. But it is 35% of the total landscapable area, or the total lot size, sorry, not the landscapable area. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, then you'd only be allowed 3,500 square feet of sod for your lot. Right now, our code just says we encourage those new houses, but we don't require it. If we wanted to comply with the requirements from Weaver Basin, then we'd have to change those words to shall have no more than 35%.
And the buyback benefits those people that are grandfathered in. If they pull out sod only, it doesn't benefit any new homes.
It doesn't benefit any new homes. It benefits current residents to convert their yard into lesser acreage on sod.
And just a side remark, or maybe something to consider, maybe, but we did a lot of work on this to get the Flip Your Strip program eligible. And then a lot of people came back and so the rebate was so low because it's so much work to flip your strip, it almost wasn't.
By the time you
Worth
take
it.
out 1,000 square feet of sod at $3, it's $3,000.
Yeah,
I would say no, and that's coming from the water guy. So
okay. Okay,
I don't understand, is it reimbursing their,
On landscape costs, to take out.
for new construction?
No, existing only.
It's an incentive for existing.
it's an incentive to lower the amount of grass you have in your yard, but it requires us to make people building from here on out only have 35% of their property be grass.
And this
Yeah.
is coming from Weaver Basin?
No,
This
It's
is
the
coming from the
state,
state,
it's the state administered through
Weaver
the
Basin.
Weaver Basin.
get
and
the
Georgia
incentive
Water
program.
and
District.
there's a lot of mixed opinions on whether that's truly currently saving water or not,
Mhm.
because I would disagree.
So I think I have a majority of it. No,
Yeah, I don't-
not a priority. Okay, thank you.
I don't feel comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that we talked about is we are working on our external accessory dwelling units. We've discussed a lot about that today, so a lot to consider. We're gonna continue researching kind of some other cities, some other problems that we were able to identify and keep working on it.
So remind me the deadline on that, is that September or October we have to have that?
Our scheduled in the
I
modern
thought it
income
was
housing was,
2025.
no, our schedule that we put was the fall, that we would adopt something in the fall.
Oh, okay.
Is what our deadline is. If we don't
Okay.
hit that, then
Because, yeah,
Is-
because we had to clarify more.
yeah,
Right,
we had to
right,
clarify a
Okay,
deadline
so
on it,
just
so.
follow it. Okay, thank you.
So we keep trucking on.
Really close.
We've talked a lot about the admin finance side, so I don't have anything new there. You can jump in, Joel, if you think of anything else we had on that. On the gravel pit and the dust situation, as you know, we have 2 sensors out from University of Utah. It's been monitoring the lower, health-related particle sizes. And they do have within them a sensor that does record some of the higher stuff. But it's all well below any of the current EPA limits. If you do remember, we had the fire smoke coming from Canada about 3-4 weeks ago. Those 3 days, it spiked higher than any of the gravel pit days.
Really?
So the fire, yeah. So the fire particulate is a lot worse that's blowing in from Canada than what their sensors are recording from our gravel pits. Anyway. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Angie?
We were hoping to have our public works, information for the council by now, but we have not received it, so that is forthcoming. Perhaps we should have a meeting regarding this.
Dave, can we schedule a meeting on that?
You bet.
Okay.
Brandon-
I have some information that we probably need to discuss. I do have some budgets back. You have some information, I believe. And then I need to find out anything that Brandon is still needing to try to put that packet together.
He told me earlier today that he was hoping to send it, the RFP draft, to me today or early tomorrow. He is leaving for the next few days at a family reunion. But he was hoping to get that to the committee, within the next 24 hours so that we could review it and perhaps give any changes. The schedule that he's got in the draft is to publish early next week. So, of course, that could alter depending on how quickly we're able to turn it around. But that's what he's got drafted, and hopefully we'll have that right away. But if we wanted to meet and talk about it, maybe first thing Monday morning or something like that, then that's a possibility.
And I don't know how much everybody would like to be involved. I mean, I think it needs to be decided how we're sending it out and and who we're sending it to. We're gonna just put it on BidSync and let it go. I would prefer not to do that, but I mean, that's, I don't know how much the full council wants to be involved in that, and we bring back our recommendation as a committee, or you want to have the whole discussion here, but I don't want anybody to not be part of it if they want to be part of that discussion.
Typically, we'll publish a project, and this is obviously a bigger project, but we'll typically publish a project through the public procurement website, the BidSync or the state SciQuest type websites. And then also, if there are contractors we know we want them to see it, we'll send it to them directly and say, we want you to be aware of this. And there's, I'm sure, a few that Mayor knows, or Brandon knows, or I know, or Blair knows. And anybody else, if you know contractors you would want to see it, we would try to ensure that they see it. So it's kind of a double barrel approach in that regard, but we can talk through how you'd like to do that. It also fits very squarely in the large category purchase, and the procurement policy has listed how we do that.
I would like to receive updates. I think you guys can handle a definite exchange and everything to do with the bidding. My question is BidSync and I don't know, are they just state, or can we get bids from out of state?
So BidSync, or when there's like 4 of them out there that the state uses, it goes out to anyone who subscribes to it. Okay. So my subscription is for the surrounding 6 states. And so I get it from all, so there's a lot of people that do the same. So it goes out to more than just, our market.
And how long do you think it would take to get a bid back?
I think and again, Brandon's probably already put a date to this, but my guess is he's got it out a month.
Yeah, I think we'd open the bid for a minimum of 3 weeks.
But we had some questions on, and maybe I just need to call Brandon, but are we doing this in 2 phases of bidding? One for the site.
Yeah, the conversations that I've had with Brandon is that we're basically looking at 2 separate contracts. One for all the site work, which is the type of project that Brandon does all the time, infrastructure and site work and whatnot, so that we could create a bid just for the site work, and then we could do a request for proposal, essentially a bid for the building itself, and have 2 separate contractors rather than have a general contractor that would oversee the entirety of the project, that we could bid it out as 2 separate ones. So the RFP draft that he has would be the building draft, and then he's still working on the actual design of the site work that we could bid out separately as a project bid. Isn't that the understanding that we've talked about? Yeah.
So yeah, you guys.
And that doesn't muddy our bond, does it, where it's 2 different contracts?
No.
Okay.
I would just like to be up to date with, obviously, I've got strong emotions on it, so I'd just rather see what's going and having slow bits of
I'm very curious of what the budget is for the sidewalk now. I mean, I have a fairly good feel for what the rest of the budget is, so. I have no idea on the side.
It's probably worth scheduling something so we can actually sit down and talk through it. I know there's a lot of work that Brandon's been doing and there's been touch points with you and with me and with the mayor and others, but to just get in the room and so everybody on that committee knows exactly where we're at and what we're looking at.
I agree.
I'll send something out right away on
I
that.
think sense to have Brandon do a presentation just before we put it out for bid, so everyone on the council knows completely what's going into it.
I think everybody's gonna get the RFP and then it's gonna be on part of our,
Yeah, Brandon, and what I told him today is when he was gonna send it to me, this is probably a moment where rather than send it, the RFP draft just to the committee members, send that to the full council so that everybody can see it and say, yes, we're good with publishing that, or here's the thoughts that I have. So yeah, this is a good moment for, the committee's been steering, but before we publish anything, I think the full council should be able to look at that.
On that note, it might be beneficial though, to just have a short presentation for public benefit, saying we discussed the bonding, this is the scope of what we're looking at.
We could put a presentation on our next city council meeting to do that.
That's a good idea.
We'll put that on the agenda.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Blair? Okay, we need to, make a motion to adjourn from city council and go into closed session.
So,
Moved.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get their pick.